The sun is sinking toward the horizon, casting long shadows on a narrow stretch of highway somewhere outside Los Angeles. The asphalt still holds its heat, but the air is already breathing the coolness of evening. It's that time of year when the city begins to forget the noise of the day, and the road becomes a mirror of loneliness, and there in the middle of this road, almost in silence, an old Toyota Corolla stands on the side of the road, like a lost leaf on water. Behind the wheel is Sarah. Her hands are shaking, her fingers gripping the steering wheel, as if it could somehow help her move. She presses the ignition key again and again. Nothing. Silence. She's alone. Her phone is almost dead. The signal is at its limit. And every car that flies by silently ignores her. She doesn't wave. She's given up hope that anyone will stop for an hour. She just sits. She thinks whether to cry or laugh about it all. Or maybe just disappear, and then, brakes. A faint sound of rubber on the asphalt. Someone has stopped. Sarah instinctively becomes alert. The door opens. A man gets out of a dark car, in dark jeans, a black t-shirt and a light jacket. His hair is slightly tousled by the wind, and his face is familiar. Too familiar to believe. "Hello," he says simply. His voice is soft, warm. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Sarah is silent. Her eyes are big, like a child's. She knows this face. She's seen it in dozens of movies, on posters, in trailers. But no. This can't be. Not on this empty road. Not here. Not now. The car won't start, she finally manages. "I don't know what happened," he nods. Without further ado, he approaches the hood. His movements are calm, confident. Without pathos. No cameras. "No, I'm a star. Just a man who wants to help. I'm Keanu, by the way," he says, smiling. As if this is something new. As if the world doesn't know about it. "Sarah," she answers, still not believing her eyes. That he opens the hood, looks inside. Asks a few simple questions. Asks to turn the key. Listens. Clicks something. Tries again. Once more. And again, and then, in the evening silence, the engine suddenly comes to life. Like a heart that has heard hope, Sarah looks at him in amazement. Not as a star. As a person. The one who didn't drive past. The one who stopped, and Keanu just smiles. Without unnecessary words. Without self-praise. "I think you'll get there," he says, like an old friend who just did a good deed. That he closes the hood, wipes his hands on a napkin he's taken from the glove compartment. And is about to leave when Sarah finally finds her voice. "Why did you stop?" He pauses for a moment. And without turning around, he answers, "Because if it were my sister, I would want someone to stop too," and then he left, just Keanu. Just a human. Sarah was behind the wheel, but she didn't move. The engine was running, the arrows on the panel came to life, but her hands couldn't bring themselves to turn the wheel. Her heart was beating fast, as if something big and incomprehensible had just flown past her life. Keanu Reeves. Here. Just stopped, helped, and disappeared. Her gaze slid to the rearview mirror. His car was no longer on the road. It seemed like a vision. But there was a napkin in her pocket. An ordinary car napkin, on which he had wiped his hands. And on it, a light stain of grease. Fact. Proof that it had happened. She finally moved. Slowly, carefully, as if she were carrying glass, a fragile impression of this meeting. And all the way home, through the flashing lights of the freeway, Sarah was silent. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't pick up the phone. One phrase kept running through her head: because if it were my sister, I would want someone to stop too. Sister, these words pierced her heart. She had a sister. She had lost her in an accident 2 years ago. Then too, it was evening, the road, the lights flickering. And no one stopped. The tears burst out of her own accord. She hadn't expected this from herself. She hadn't cried for so long that she had almost forgotten how. But now something inside had come unglued. It had fallen apart under the weight of this small kindness. The next morning she woke up with the feeling that she had dreamed something significant. But it wasn't a dream. She told her husband, but he only shrugged. Well, Keanu Reeves? Are you serious? This isn't a TV series. This is life. Sarah smiled. He didn't believe her. And she wasn't offended. Because it wasn't about whether she was believed. And that she would never be the same again. The following week, she accidentally found an old letter from her sister. There were lines in it that she took at the time as a sentimental joke: the world sometimes seems indifferent. But not everyone is like that. There are those who still see. Those who still feel. If you find one, don't forget. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest. Keanu didn't leave his number, didn't leave a photo, didn't say who he was. But she knew. Not as a fan. Not as a spectator. But as a person who saw light in another person. Quiet, real, strong. She opened her laptop. For the first time in many months, she wanted to write something, just a post, not a story. Not about events. But about impressions. About a person who did what the characters on the screen don't do, did it in reality. Her post was simple: one day my engine stalled on the side of the road. And while the whole world drove by, he stopped. Not for selfies. Not for cameras. Just to help. Keanu Reeves, the one we know as an actor, but I saw something more in him. A person who stopped when others didn't have time. Thank you. She didn't tag him. She didn't post a photo. She didn't seek fame. But the comments poured in. People shared their own stories, not about stars, but about random strangers. About those who didn't pass by. And in this stream of words, confessions, memories, something began to be restored in Sarah herself, and one morning a letter arrived. Without a return address. Just a short note, handwritten: when you stop, the world changes a little. Don't stop. K. She stared at these letters for a long time. Then she smiled. And she realized this story was just beginning. Several days had passed since then. Sarah kept returning to that moment. As to a favorite book, she would open the right page in her mind, reread it again and again with the eyes of her heart. And every time that moment came to her mind, the moment when he had appeared out of nowhere, something trembled in her chest. The note that had come by mail lay on the table by the window like a talisman. It was not magnificent. It contained no precise promise or mention. But there was authenticity in those few words. The man the world was used to seeing on posters turned out to be a quiet avenger for kindness. When you stop, the world changes a little. Don't stop. K. Sarah must have reread it hundreds of times. She could almost hear him saying it, not loudly, without pathos, almost in a whisper, like a person who is used to speaking not into a microphone, but into the eyes, life gradually became different. Not because external circumstances changed. No, the bills came, work remained routine, the city breathed in its usual rhythm. But it changed. Sarah started with things that had previously seemed small to her. She was the first to say, "Good morning," to the cashier, even if he didn't look her in the eye. She held the door for an elderly couple, not waiting for a "thank you." She put a few bottles of water and a first aid kit in the trunk. And every time she saw someone on the side of the road she stopped. She asked, "Can I help you?" And often that was enough. One evening she noticed an old pickup truck parked with emergency lights on the side of the road. She went over. A man in a leather jacket, his hands shaking, was trying to change a tire. "Can I hold the flashlight?" she offered quietly. He looked at her and smiled. He said, "Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to stop." These were the very words she could have said herself. And Sarah realized, she was becoming the light that had once touched her. Soon she took up writing again. For many years her work had lain in the shadows, unwritten stories, fragments from the past, notes of pain that refused to turn into music. But now the words came easily. Her stories were no longer fictional escapes, they became testimonies of real warmth. Her main character is a nameless man who helped people, expecting nothing. He came unexpectedly and disappeared, leaving only a change in the heart. And everyone who met him became a little different. This image was not Keanu directly. But it was inspired by him. Her light. Her story. She submitted one of the short stories to a small literary competition. Not with hope, but with a sense of completion. Let her go out into the world, she thought. Maybe someone will find themselves there. And the world responded. A month later, Sarah received a letter. Her story was chosen to be read at a private evening in Los Angeles, an event where people read not for fame but for meaning. Sarah hesitated. She was not a public figure. But something inside her made her say, yes. The theater was intimate. The stage was barely raised above the audience. A stage where there were no spotlights, but lamps, warm and alive, like the kitchen light in a house where people were always waiting. Her story was read by a presenter in a voice that was even but sincere. And in every word that sounded, there was something she had experienced. Her soul, turned outward, was woven into the silence of the hall, and then she saw him. He sat in the corner, in a dark cap, almost hidden. Listening. Not like a celebrity, not like someone famous. Like the same man who had simply stopped one day. Sarah didn't come up. She didn't look for confirmation. Because it was in his eyes. In his warm, almost invisible smile when she looked up. Their eyes met and they didn't need a word. But later in the evening, when everyone had already started to disperse, he came up. For the first time since that evening on the highway. "You're growing," he said quietly. "And that's the most important thing." "Thank you for that evening," she whispered. "I've started to see people again." He nodded. "We all just don't notice sometimes. The main thing is to start again." And before he left, he handed her a new sheet of paper. Again written in his own handwriting, "Your light is not mine now. It's yours, hold it. And carry on. To someone whose night it will become dawn. K." Sarah held that letter close to her heart for a long time. And she realized, she didn't just receive kindness. She inherited it. The city remained as noisy as ever. People hurried along, absorbed in their own concerns, scrolling through the news, standing in traffic jams, looking at screens instead of in their eyes. But Sarah didn't. Her world had changed. And every day she saw not just random passers-by, but living, real people. Each with their own pain, fear, or dream. After that evening in Los Angeles, after a short but profound conversation with Keanu, a new need was finally born in her, not just to continue, but to pass on. To be the one whom they stopped. To be someone's chance when it seemed no one would come. She started with something simple, with an initiative she called, Stop for a Minute. The blog, which had once been empty, now had its first post. I'm not a volunteer. Not a psychologist. Not a superhero. I'm just someone who was once helped. And now I know, even a moment of attention can pull someone out of the darkness. If you see someone on the side of the road, stop. If you see someone tired, ask if they're okay. It won't save the world. But it might save the day. And a day is something that I'm starting with myself. What about you? It was just one post. But it turned out there were many like her. People started sharing. Hundreds, then thousands. About how someone bought coffee for a stranger in line. How a student gave her raincoat to a homeless person in the rain. How a guy left an anonymous note of support in a library textbook. Sarah created a separate page, Chain of Light. There, anyone could write about a moment when they were either helped or stopped themselves. And she kept every such letter, every comment. She read it. She replied. She believed it. One story came from a woman named Marie. I read your post the day I was going to run away. I was sitting in my car, about to drive away somewhere where no one would find me, and then I saw an old man who couldn't cross the street. I don't know why, but I got out. I took his hand. We walked together. He said to me, "You're a good soul. I can see that." And that was enough. I didn't leave. I went home, and I want to tell you, thank you. Your post was the thread that kept me going. Sarah held the letter in her hands like a jewel. As proof that the light she had received from Keanu now lives in others. In Marie. In an old man who said the right words at the right time, and then she wrote to him again. Not a letter. And just a short mention on the blog, you were the first to stop. Now there are hundreds. And they don't stop. Your light has become a snowfall of kindness, and I believe that the chain will not break, because now there are many of us. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This time without a signature. Without handwriting. Typed. But she knew, when you help one person, you change one story. When you set an example, you change the direction of the wind. You changed the direction, and I am proud that I stopped then, because it turned out that this was only the beginning. She cried. Quietly. Not from pain, but from hope. The hope that had become reality. Sarah began to receive invitations, to speak to students, to write for volunteer organizations, to read her stories at charity events. And though her heart always remained humble, she knew it was right, because her story is no longer hers. It has become shared. And in everyone who reads, there is a chance to see the light. And, when the time comes, to stop. On the highway. In the store. In life, the world, even when we illuminate it with goodness, can sometimes be too loud. And even the kindest hearts can get tired. They don't break, they just get tired. That was the case with Sarah. She became famous among those who believed in the power of small actions. Her story spread, her words were published in charity magazines. Her project, Stop for a Minute, already had over 200 volunteers across the country, but, one day she woke up with a feeling of emptiness. Not pain exactly, emptiness. Her usual morning rituals no longer gave her warmth. The smell of coffee didn't bring peace. She read letters of gratitude and felt like she was reading about someone else. The goodness she carried began to demand more from her than she could give. Responsibility grew. People expected her, turned to her with requests, with emotions, with stories. And Sarah, who always spoke up, became silent. Not because she didn't want to, but because her heart begged for silence. One day she turned off her phone. For 2 days. Then for a week, and she left at a small town in the mountains, where there were no supermarkets, only a cafe on the corner, where everyone was known by name. Sarah took a room on the second floor of a wooden house that smelled of cinnamon and old books. Every morning she went out onto the wooden veranda with a cup of tea. She watched the clouds floating over the roofs. And she was silent. One of the days was rainy. The city was submerged in water, like a blanket. And it was then that she noticed a girl wet, with a backpack standing near a bus stop. She was holding something in her hands, maybe a notebook, maybe a map, and she was lost in every movement. Sarah didn't come up right away. She just watched. And then she did something she hadn't done in a long time. "Aren't you lost?" she asked quietly. The girl looked around. A young woman, about 20, with big dark eyes and trembling fingers. I don't know where to spend the night. I had an agreement through the website, but everything was cancelled. And now nothing works. I'm not local." Sarah silently handed her her umbrella. "Let's go. I know the place." It was a small guest house, the same one where Sarah had stayed. She talked to the hostess, paid for the room, and didn't notice how she had become the person Keanu had once been. The girl's name was Lily. It turned out that she was hitchhiking, looking for herself, and had almost lost faith in people. "I was sure I would have to sleep on a bench," she confessed in the evening. "And then you showed up. Just like that." Sarah smiled, but not with joy. But with warmth, "And I used to think that no one would stop. And he did. And now I know, someone always has to stop. At least one." Lily looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "You know, you look like that woman from the blog who wrote about the chain of kindness. I read it. There was also a story about a car on the highway." Sarah froze. And suddenly she felt something return. No, not fame. Not confidence. But a pulse. The pulse of her why. She felt part of history again. Not a hero. Not a symbol. Just part of the chain. When Lily left the next day, she left a note. A small, neat one. "I don't know who I'll become. But I know for sure, I want to be someone who stops. Like you, and someday, maybe I will also help someone who has lost themselves." Sarah sat for a long time with that piece of paper in her hands. And then, she picked up a pen. For the first time in many weeks. When your light seems to be extinguished, it is not the end that it is simply time for someone else to hold it for you for a little while. The light is not yours. It is between us, and it always returns. A year passed. Stop for a minute grew into a real movement. From Sarah's small blog, to a volunteer community operating in several countries. People created mini-groups, held events, school meetings, even kindness lessons. But most importantly, they stopped. Where someone needed it, Sarah, although she remained an inspiration, spoke in public less and less often. She did not seek a stage, she was drawn to the places where everything began. Where there were no spectators. Only people. Only the road. Only the choice, to stop or not. She wrote less. But she lived more deeply. Her mornings no longer began with checking the mail, but with tea and a look out the window. And although fame touched her, she never allowed it to settle inside. One autumn day, Sarah received an invitation, an informal one, handwritten, almost on a napkin. There is a place. There is a time. There is a story that wants to end, that if your heart tells you to come, come. November 28, 5 p.m. Parking lot at the exit from Los Angeles, just a roadside. Just silence. She knew where. And her heart had no doubt. It was the same place. The same road. The same highway where her engine had once stopped and the world had turned on. She had arrived earlier. She was standing next to her car now. It was a different car, but the essence had not changed. She was staring at the horizon, not knowing who she would see. If she would see at all, and then a familiar sound. A quiet engine. A dark car. The same footsteps. The same smile. Keanu. He had not changed, maybe a little more gray hair, a little slower gait. But the same light in his eyes. And when he stopped in front of her, no words were needed. They just stood there. People who were heroes to each other without even realizing it. I wanted to see what it all became, he said finally, and I wanted to say thank you. She replied, no. I thank you. Because you made my gesture a story. And a story a movement. He took something small from his pocket. He handed it to her, a small silver key chain shaped like a flashlight. It's a symbol. Don't put it out. Sarah squeezed it in her palm. The key chain was warm. I never thought kindness could have such power, she whispered, because you saw it as a moment. And she was like a wave. She touched others. I met a girl. Lily. She was lost, like me. And now, it seems, she's next. Keanu nodded, and something changed in his gaze. Do you want to know why I stopped then? He asked unexpectedly. No. I already know. You stopped because you could. Because you wanted to. Because your heart told you to. Not exactly, he answered quietly. I stopped because someone stopped for me once. Sarah looked up in surprise. I was young. My bike broke down. It was dark, empty, cold. And someone, an ordinary driver, got out and said, I don't know who you are, but you are a person. And I will stop. He was silent for a moment. Then he added, I didn't have time to thank you then. But every time I stop it's my gratitude to him. And then Sarah realized, her story didn't begin with Keanu. And it didn't end with her. It was a chain. An endless one. A few days after that meeting, Sarah received a letter. This time from Lily. I work at a school. And today a boy said to me, Teacher, I saw you give your jacket to a stranger. I want to be a person who stops too. I cried, this is your story. And its end is a new beginning. Thank you for stopping for me once that I will not forget. Sarah closed her eyes. In her hands was a flashlight. Small. Silver. And in it was a whole world.